Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the sterile hallway of St. Mary's General Hospital, her rubber-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the polished floor. To everyone around her, she was just another invisible worker in scrubs, someone who emptied trash cans and mopped floors, while the real heroes in white coats saved lives. But Maria carried a secret that weighed heavier than the industrial-strength bleach bottles in her cart. 23 years ago, Maria had been Detective Maria Santos of the Chicago Police Department. She had walked different halls then, chasing down leads and interrogating suspects in the Violent Crimes Division. Her badge had been her pride, her service weapon, an extension of her training and dedication to justice. But one case had changed everything, forcing her to disappear into a new identity, a new life, and a job that kept her safely anonymous. The transition hadn't been easy. From carrying a Glock 19 to carrying a mop bucket. From commanding respect in interrogation rooms to being overlooked in hospital corridors, Maria had learned to blend into the background, to become part of the scenery that medical staff barely noticed. She preferred it that way. The less attention she drew, the safer everyone remained. Her supervisor, Janet Morrison, had hired Maria 8 years ago without asking too many questions about her sparse employment history. Janet saw a reliable worker who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained about the demanding schedule. What Janet didn't know was that Maria's keen observational skills, honed by years of police work, made her acutely aware of everything happening in the hospital. Maria noticed things others missed. She saw which doctors were having affairs, which nurses were stealing medication, and which security guards fell asleep during their shifts. She witnessed family arguments in waiting rooms, observed suspicious behavior from visitors, and memorized the faces of everyone who didn't belong. Her training had taught her to catalog details automatically, and old habits died hard. The emergency department was Maria's primary assignment, and she had developed an unofficial protective instinct toward the staff who worked there. Nurse Rebecca Chen was someone Maria watched over particularly carefully. Rebecca was young, dedicated, and reminded Maria of her own daughter, whom she hadn't seen since entering witness protection. Rebecca worked the night shift, often alone with patients who arrived in various states of distress, anger, and desperation. On quiet nights, Maria and Rebecca would share brief conversations during Maria's cleaning rounds. Rebecca would ask about Maria's family, not knowing that every answer was carefully constructed fiction. Maria would ask about Rebecca's studies, genuinely interested in the young woman's ambition to become a nurse practitioner. These small interactions had become precious to Maria, representing the closest thing to normal human connection she allowed herself. The hospital's security was adequate but not exceptional. 2 guards worked the night shift, patrolling different areas of the building. Metal detectors protected the main entrances. But there were service entrances and emergency exits that relied more on locked doors than active monitoring. Maria had mapped every entrance and exit during her first month of employment, another habit from her police days that she couldn't shake. 3 months before the incident that would change everything, Maria began noticing a pattern. A man in his 30s had been visiting the emergency department repeatedly, always late at night, usually claiming chest pains or stomach problems. The symptoms never warranted admission, and he would leave after a few hours of observation. What troubled Maria was his behavior during these visits. The man, who gave his name as David Thompson, would ask specific questions about shift schedules and staff assignments. He seemed particularly interested in which nurses worked alone and when security guards made their rounds. During one visit, Maria observed him taking pictures with his phone, ostensibly of his insurance cards, but the camera was pointed at the nurse's station layout. Maria's instincts screamed danger, but she faced a dilemma. Reporting her suspicions would require explaining how she had developed such acute observational skills. It would invite questions about her background that she couldn't answer truthfully. She had worked too hard to build her new identity to risk exposure over a suspicion, even a strong one. Instead, Maria began paying closer attention to Thompson's visits. She memorized his face, his voice, his mannerisms. She noted that he favored his right hand and walked with a slight limp that disappeared when he thought no one was watching. She observed that he always parked in the same area of the parking lot, near a service entrance that led directly to the emergency department. Rebecca had mentioned Thompson to Maria once, describing him as Creepy, but not in any way that violated hospital policy. He was polite to staff, cooperative with medical procedures, and never made overt threats, but Rebecca trusted her instincts, and her instincts told her something was wrong with the frequent patient who asked too many questions. Maria wanted to warn Rebecca directly, but doing so would require explaining suspicions that a janitor shouldn't possess. Instead, she found subtle ways to be present whenever Thompson visited. She would time her cleaning schedule to coincide with his arrivals, positioning herself where she could observe both Thompson and the staff interactions. During Thompson's most recent visit, 2 weeks before the shooting, Maria had witnessed something that confirmed her worst fears. While pretending to use his phone, Thompson had taken detailed pictures of the emergency department's layout, including the positions of security cameras and the location of the staff break room. When a security guard approached to ask about his photography, Thompson had smoothly switched to taking selfies, claiming he wanted to document his recovery from what he called a heart condition. Maria knew then that Thompson was conducting surveillance, planning something that would put innocent people in danger. Every instinct she had developed during her years in law enforcement told her that Thompson was preparing for violence. The question wasn't if something would happen, but when. She began carrying her old service weapon to work, hidden in her cleaning supplies. The Glock had been the one thing she had kept from her previous life. Cleaned and maintained, but never used since entering protection. Maria told herself she was being paranoid, that 8 years of hiding had made her overly suspicious. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca and the other night shift workers were walking into a trap. The night everything changed started like any other. Maria arrived at work early, stocking her cart with cleaning supplies and checking the schedule for any special instructions. Rebecca was working alone in the emergency department, the usual second nurse having called in sick. The security guard assigned to that section of the hospital was making his rounds, which took him away from the emergency department for 20-minute intervals. Maria had just finished cleaning the men's restroom when she heard the distinctive sound of footsteps in the hallway. She recognized the gait immediately. David Thompson had returned, but this time he wasn't dressed as a patient. He wore dark clothing and moved with purpose, his previous limp completely absent. In his right hand, barely visible in the dim corridor lighting, Maria glimpsed something that made her blood run cold. Thompson was carrying a gun, and he was heading straight for the nurse's station where Rebecca sat alone, reviewing patient charts and unaware of the danger approaching from behind. Maria's training kicked in automatically. Years of muscle memory and tactical thinking overrode 8 years of carefully constructed civilian behavior. She assessed the situation in seconds. Thompson was 40 feet from Rebecca's position, moving steadily, but not running. The corridor layout gave Maria a clear line of sight, but limited cover options. Rebecca remained unaware, her back turned to the approaching threat. Time seemed to slow as Maria's mind calculated angles and distances. Thompson's weapon appeared to be a semi-automatic pistol, held low against his leg but ready to raise quickly. His approach suggested familiarity with the hospital layout, confirming Maria's suspicions about his surveillance activities. The nearest security guard was 3 floors away, making his scheduled rounds of the pediatric ward. Maria reached into her cleaning cart, her fingers finding the familiar grip of her Glock beneath a stack of cleaning rags. The weapon felt strange in her hand after years of handling mops and brooms. But the weight and balance were exactly as she remembered. Her thumb automatically checked the safety while her eyes remained locked on Thompson's advancing figure. Rebecca looked up from her charts, perhaps sensing movement in her peripheral vision. Maria watched the young nurse's expression change from routine boredom to confusion as she registered Thompson's presence in civilian clothes. Rebecca started to smile, preparing to ask if he needed assistance, when Thompson raised his weapon. The moment crystallized for Maria. She could see Thompson's finger moving to the trigger, could see Rebecca beginning to understand the danger but unable to react quickly enough. 8 years of hiding, 8 years of carefully maintained anonymity, 8 years of denying who she really was. All of it evaporated in an instant. Maria stepped into the corridor, raising her weapon in a smooth, practiced motion. "Chicago Police! Drop your weapon!" The words came automatically, her voice carrying the authority she had spent years suppressing. Thompson spun toward her, his gun swinging away from Rebecca and toward this unexpected threat. Thompson's face showed surprise and calculation. He had planned for security guards and hospital protocols, but not for an armed janitor who moved and spoke like law enforcement. His moment of hesitation gave Maria the tactical advantage she needed. "I said drop it, now!" Instead of complying, Thompson made the fatal decision to engage. He brought his weapon up toward Maria, his movement telegraphed by tensed shoulders and shifting weight. Maria's response was instantaneous and precise. Her first shot caught Thompson's center mass, the report echoing through the corridor like thunder in the sterile environment. Thompson stumbled backward but remained standing, his gun still raised. Maria's second shot finished what the first had started, and David Thompson collapsed to the hospital floor, his weapon clattering away across the polished surface Maria had mopped countless times. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca sat frozen behind her desk, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Maria maintained her shooting stance for several seconds, ensuring Thompson posed no further threat, before lowering her weapon and moving to secure his gun. Her police training took over completely now. Maria checked Thompson's pulse, confirmed he was deceased, and immediately began securing the scene. She called out to Rebecca, "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" Rebecca shook her head, still too shocked to speak coherently. Maria retrieved her cell phone and dialed 911, identifying herself as Maria Santos, and reporting an officer-involved shooting at St. Mary's General Hospital. The dispatcher's confusion was evident. There was no Officer Santos on duty at the hospital, and no police response had been requested. Maria provided her badge number from memory, a number that had been retired 8 years ago but remained burned into her consciousness. Hospital security arrived first, drawn by the gunshots. The guards found Maria standing over Thompson's body, her weapon secured, and her hands visible. She calmly explained that she was a former Chicago police officer and had responded to an immediate threat against hospital staff. The security guards, trained in basic emergency response but not tactical situations, struggled to process the scene before them. Rebecca finally found her voice, telling anyone who would listen that the janitor had saved her life. She described how Thompson had approached with a gun, how Maria had appeared from nowhere and stopped him. Her words tumbled out in a rush of gratitude and bewilderment, painting Maria as a hero, while Maria herself remained focused on the practical concerns of securing the scene and preserving evidence. The first police units arrived within minutes, their response time impressive even by urban standards. The officers who entered the emergency department found a scene that challenged their training and experience. A hospital janitor claiming to be a former police officer had shot and killed an armed man in defense of a nurse. The physical evidence supported the story, but the circumstances raised immediate questions. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez took charge of the scene, her experienced eye cataloging details while trying to understand the unusual situation. She spoke with Maria privately, noting the woman's calm demeanor and professional handling of the aftermath. Maria's knowledge of police procedure was evident in how she had secured the scene and preserved evidence, but her identity remained a mystery. When Rodriguez asked for Maria's police identification, Maria explained that she had been in witness protection for 8 years and provided a contact number for her former handler in the U.S. Marshal's Service. The verification process would take time, but Maria's story began to check out as Rodriguez made preliminary calls to Chicago PD and federal agencies. Rebecca was treated for shock but remained physically unharmed. She insisted on speaking with Maria before the paramedics took her for observation, grasping Maria's hands and repeating, "Thank you," over and over. Maria had saved her life, but she couldn't understand how a janitor had the skills and training to respond so effectively to armed violence. Hospital administration arrived as news of the shooting spread through the building. The CEO, Janet Morrison, and security director all struggled to reconcile what they knew about their quiet janitor with what had just occurred in their emergency department. Maria Santos, who had cleaned their floors and emptied their trash for 8 years, had just engaged in a gun battle and emerged victorious. The investigation into Thompson's motives began immediately. Police found detailed floor plans of the hospital in his car, along with photographs of staff schedules and security procedures. His phone contained surveillance footage he had recorded during his fake patient visits, confirming Maria's suspicions about his reconnaissance activities. Thompson's apartment yielded even more disturbing evidence. He had assembled a detailed dossier on Rebecca Chen, including her home address, work schedule, and daily routines. Police found evidence that he had been stalking her for months, escalating from observation to planning what appeared to be either a kidnapping or murder. Rebecca had been completely unaware that she was being targeted. Maria's identity verification took several hours, but eventually confirmed her story. Detective Maria Santos had been a decorated member of the Chicago Police Department until her testimony in a major organized crime case had put her life in danger. The Witness Protection Program had given her a new identity and relocated her to a different state, where she had lived quietly for 8 years as a hospital janitor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. The very skills that had made Maria a target, her ability to observe, analyze, and respond to criminal behavior, had saved Rebecca's life. Maria's forced retirement from law enforcement had brought her to exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, to prevent a tragedy. As dawn approached, Maria sat in an interview room at the local police station, giving her statement to detectives who were still processing the night's events. She had blown her cover completely, exposing herself to potential danger from the criminals who had forced her into hiding 8 years ago. But looking across the station at Rebecca, who was safe and alive, Maria felt no regret about her decision. The aftermath of the shooting brought changes that rippled through every aspect of Maria's carefully constructed life. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story of the hospital janitor who had saved a nurse's life, though initial reports protected her identity pending the investigation. The hospital administration found themselves fielding calls from reporters, all wanting to know more about their unlikely hero. Federal Marshal James Patterson arrived from Chicago the next morning, his face showing the stress of a protection case that had just become public in the worst possible way. Maria had worked with Patterson during her original entry into witness protection 8 years ago, and he understood better than anyone what her exposure meant for her safety. "The Torino crime family hasn't forgotten about you," Patterson told Maria during their private meeting. "Your testimony put 3 of their top lieutenants in federal prison for life. Coming out of protection like this, even to save someone's life, puts you right back on their radar." Maria listened to Patterson's concerns with the same calm she had shown during the shooting. She understood the risks, had lived with them every day for 8 years. But she also understood something Patterson couldn't fully grasp. She had found a purpose again. Something worth the risk of exposure. The investigation into Thompson's background revealed a disturbing pattern of stalking behavior that had escalated over several months. Rebecca learned that her stalker had been planning for weeks, possibly months, gathering information about her routines and the hospital's security procedures. Police found evidence that Thompson had intended to kidnap Rebecca, with disturbing implications about what he planned to do afterward. Rebecca struggled with the revelation that she had been targeted without her knowledge. The friendly patient who had occasionally chatted with her during his visits had actually been studying her, planning violence against her. The knowledge that someone had watched her so carefully, had planned to harm her, left her feeling vulnerable and violated. Maria became Rebecca's unofficial protector during the investigation period. She stayed close to the young nurse whenever possible, using her skills to watch for any signs of continuing threats. The bond between them had deepened beyond the usual relationship between hospital staff members. Rebecca saw Maria differently now, understanding that the quiet janitor was actually someone with remarkable courage and skill. Hospital administration faced difficult decisions about Maria's continued employment. Her heroic actions had saved a staff member's life, but her concealed identity and hidden weapon raised policy questions. The CEO ultimately decided that Maria's actions had been justified and necessary, but new security protocols would need to be established. The media attention intensified as more details emerged about Maria's background. News outlets learned about her police career and the circumstances that had forced her into witness protection. The story of a decorated detective who had sacrificed her career to testify against organized crime, only to save a life years later, while working as a janitor, captured public imagination. Maria found herself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. Reporters tried to interview her at work and at home, forcing her to navigate carefully between protecting her privacy and acknowledging the public interest in her story. She declined most interview requests, but eventually agreed to speak with one local reporter to set the record straight about what had happened. The interview revealed Maria's perspective on the shooting and her years in protection. She spoke about the difficulty of leaving her police career behind, the challenge of building a new identity, and the satisfaction she had found in her hospital work. Most importantly, she emphasized that she had simply done what anyone in her position should have done when faced with an immediate threat to an innocent person. Rebecca returned to work after a week of administrative leave, but her experience with being stalked and nearly attacked had changed her. She was more cautious now, more aware of her surroundings, and grateful in ways she struggled to express. She began spending time with Maria outside of work, the two women developing a friendship based on their shared trauma and mutual respect. The federal prosecutor's office reviewed Maria's case and made a decision that surprised everyone. Rather than forcing her back into hiding, they offered her a position as a consultant on witness protection cases. Her unique experience of living successfully underground for 8 years, combined with her law enforcement background, made her valuable to other people entering protection. Maria considered the offer carefully. It would mean leaving her hospital job and the quiet life she had built, but it would also mean using her skills and experience to help others in similar situations. She had learned valuable lessons about survival and adaptation that could benefit other protected witnesses. The Torino crime family's response to Maria's exposure was swift but surprising. Rather than issuing threats or attempting retaliation, they seemed to recognize that attacking Maria now would bring enormous law enforcement attention to their operations. The public sympathy for Maria's heroic actions had made her effectively untouchable, at least for the immediate future. St. Mary's Hospital implemented new security measures following the incident, including enhanced background checks for frequent visitors and improved communication between security and medical staff. Maria's observations about Thompson's suspicious behavior led to training programs for staff on recognizing potential threats and reporting concerns through proper channels. Rebecca decided to pursue her nursing practitioner degree with renewed determination, inspired partly by Maria's example of courage and service. She understood now how quickly situations could become dangerous and wanted to be better prepared to help others in crisis situations. Her experience had given her a deeper appreciation for the people who protect and serve others, often without recognition. Maria ultimately accepted the federal position, but negotiated to remain based in the same city so she could maintain her friendship with Rebecca and her connections to the hospital. Her new role involved helping other protected witnesses adapt to new identities and build sustainable lives underground. Her 8 years of experience as a successful hidden witness made her uniquely qualified for the work. The transition from janitor to federal consultant was easier than Maria's original transition from detective to janitor had been. She was moving back toward work that utilized her natural skills and training, rather than away from them. The federal salary was better than hospital pay, but Maria found she missed some aspects of her cleaning work, particularly the quiet satisfaction of maintaining clean, safe spaces for healing. Rebecca organized a farewell party for Maria's departure from the hospital, but it was more of a celebration than a goodbye. Maria would be working in federal offices in the same city and had promised to maintain their friendship. The party gave hospital staff a chance to thank Maria properly for her service, both as a janitor who had done her job with dedication and as the person who had saved Rebecca's life. 6 months after the shooting, Maria testified in a federal hearing about witness protection effectiveness. Her case had become a study in how protected witnesses could successfully integrate into new communities while maintaining their safety. Her testimony led to policy changes that gave protected witnesses more support in finding meaningful work and building authentic relationships. Rebecca completed her nurse practitioner program 2 years later, with Maria attending the graduation ceremony as an honored guest. Their friendship had evolved into something like family, with Maria serving as a mentor and protective figure in Rebecca's life. The young woman who had been saved by Maria's quick action had grown into someone stronger and more confident, inspired partly by Maria's example. The David Thompson case became a training scenario in multiple law enforcement agencies, illustrating the importance of recognizing surveillance behavior and the value of having skilled personnel in unexpected places. Maria's story demonstrated that heroism could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the most ordinary-looking people carried extraordinary capabilities. Maria's new career in witness protection services proved fulfilling in ways her hospital work had never been. She helped other people navigate the challenges she had faced, using her experience to make their transitions smoother and more successful. Her unique perspective as someone who had lived both sides of law enforcement, as an officer and as a protected witness, made her invaluable to the program. Years later, Maria would reflect on that night in the hospital corridor as the moment when she stopped hiding from who she really was. She had spent 8 years trying to become invisible, but when Rebecca's life was threatened, Maria's true nature had emerged automatically. The shooting had ended her life as a janitor but had given her back her identity as someone who protects others. The hospital kept a small plaque in the emergency department, acknowledging Maria's service both as a dedicated employee and as the person who had saved Rebecca's life. It served as a reminder to staff that heroism could come from unexpected sources and that everyone deserved to be seen and valued for their full potential, not just their job title. Maria Santos had learned that running from your past was sometimes necessary for survival, but that embracing your true nature was necessary for living. Her 8 years as a hospital janitor had been preparation for the moment when she would need to be a police officer again, even if only for a few crucial seconds. Sometimes the most important work of your life happens in the space between who you were and who you're becoming.